Hi everyone, my name is Shane and welcome to the first episode of Beyond Bava Park Podcast.
Yeah, and again, welcome again to our first episode of Beyond Bava Park. For some of you guys that may not know, so Bava Park is the home of rugby in Port Moresby, and we like to think it's the home of rugby in PNG. And yeah, our podcast is just to speak about education in sports, helping kids that are going through that transition right now, juggling school and education,
How to balance.
and sports, and how to balance both, how to get those values that you can pick up in sports and then apply them in education and your career. Beyond Bava Park is basically a podcast on sports and education. We know there's a lot of kids going through that transition that we also went through, and the podcast is more just our providing just lived experience and tips for kids to, maybe some of them they can use, they can lean off and just to assist them get through the that phase when you're going through sports and education. So thank you for joining us, and hope you enjoy this the podcast.
Yep, so just to start off, so Emmanuel and myself, we, from a rugby point of view, we come under the Harlequins Rugby Union Club. Back in, I think Emmanuel started off back in the early 2000s, I believe. And then I joined just, I can't remember, 2007, I think. Father's from Eastern Britain, a bit of Central. My mom's from Sepik, but I predominantly grew up here in Port Moresby. My background, I have a computer science background, which we'll talk more later on in the segment.
I was born and raised here, wildlife settlement. Mom and dad are primary school teachers. I have a background in law. And I think aside from that, I represented the junior Boromas, junior Pukpuks. Was fortunate to make it to the national sevens and the national 15s teams. So that's a general bit about myself. I think I started playing for Harleys when I was 15 through the under-19s. I was fortunate to make the Premier grade in 2004 or 5. And went through the whole grades.
Yep. Yeah, I think for myself, I started in 2007. That's when I made my debut in the club under the under-19s team with the Harlequins Rugby Union team. Unfortunately, me and the group of boys that I was part of, some of the names such as Chris Kaka, Desmond Kopok, Fari,
Rocky Nuffin,
who later on went into
Ghana
the defense rugby
team.
Leme Tole, Cornelius Toti, what's the other one?
Des Kopo,
yeah, we mentioned Des. Karo Daimo as well. So we had a really young, vibrant team then that we managed to have a success season during that year. And then went on to progress on in the other grades as we came along. And then I think Emmanuel then was part of, I think 2007 you're in.
Yeah, in 2007 I was part of the Premier grade.
Yeah.
When you guys were coming through the under-19s. Yeah, we in Premier grade as well, we had a great crop of young players. We had Cecil Davani, Kapua. There were senior players like Willie Petali, the Pangantana brothers, Carl Hood, the late Carl Hood.
Anthony.
Yeah. That club transition that we had coming through the Harleys, the culture and the club that we had so many good players and so many good leaders in that circle that assisted us with our growth. Making the transition to high school and to uni at that time, and that was a massive difference for us. I think, one of the important things about coming through that Harley system at that time, we had like a really hardcore coach in the under 19s. It was Robert Doko. He's still coaching. He just set the standards for a lot of us. He was the same coach for, I think, Shane and them as well. And that culture that we had in the club at that time was all about just standards. It was either you turn up, you train, you play. You couldn't miss training. You couldn't, it didn't mean like if you had a good game on the weekend that you could slack off on Monday. The values of the club cultures at that time was every week we had to reset and then end our sport. And I think Shane, like you can attest to it that there were so many people competing for sports.
Back then, just as well you mentioned, back then we had, shout out to the coaches. So we had Coach Robert Doko, obviously Coach Billy Rapela as well. We had Kevin Rooney, who was always there. Back then, Lakano. Who's the tall, lanky guy? I forgot his name, from KVN. Ian Liveris.
He was
a forwards coach, man. I used to get scared of him.
So these were really good, former Pukpuks, but also very hard clubmen for Harleys, and we just had such a good culture and the standard that was imparted into us to come through. And I think that was one of the biggest guidance for us, making that transition, juggling, high school and, the challenges of high school, and then juggling, trying to make premier grade or meeting to the club standards that we had. Really made a difference for all of us. I know for me, myself, when I was in that grade 11, grade 12 stage, there was a lot of influence that we had, a lot of peer pressure outside of rugby. You were dating or you had people, having boyfriends and girlfriends. There was alcohol happening. We had these generational things in school. And I think just being in that culture for the club or even in rugby generally made a big difference for myself, in that it allowed me to just focus on important things, and just being disciplined, not get too caught up with all the other distractions in life.
Outside of rugby,
rugby was just a main guideline for me, because at that time all I wanted to do was just play premier grade, because of all these great players we had that we mentioned about. Just trying to follow in those footsteps to live to those high standards that they upheld. So I think rugby was a massive difference for us at juggling, education, and the pressures of growing up in your teens. I don't know if those were the same experiences for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like one big takeaway I take out of being involved in rugby in general, and obviously the Harlequins rugby league club, rugby unit club that we're a part of, would be being coached and mentored under Coach Robert, Coach Billy, and as Emmanuel alluded towards, we had a very strict culture. Even though if you're a Pukpuk player, such as like a Roland Namo or Emmanuel Auru, and you had a good weekend of rugby and you won by 40 points plus, you still have to go back to the drawing board on Monday and end your spot from Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, which were the days we used to train. And so we had the critical one, which is Monday, which is usually the fitness.
It was the blowout session for us.
So it's either you win by 40 points plus, or you had a bad record over the weekend. You still go back to the drawing board, because back in the day we had a lot of pull talent within the club, whether it be A grade, premier grade, and so you could imagine we had
even the under 19s coming like you guys.
So we had a group of front rowers such as myself. Back in my time was me, Fiery, Karaut, Clarence Palin,
Mark
Pilon, all these guys,
Sarufa.
Sarufa Lea. And so you could imagine, and then Emmanuel had his own backline where he was competing on
Yeah.
spots with Noga,
With
Ben
Nuga,
Levy,
Ben
Chris
Levy,
Kaka,
Chris Kaka. We had Coach
Tisha Kautu was also with
Kautu.
us. So it's John Akautu now.
Yeah.
So the point is we had a big pool of players within Harlequins. And so no matter if you're a Pukpuks player, you still have to come back to the drawing board on a Monday and earn your spot for them to be named on the first 15th team. So going back to the values, and Harlequins were really big on humility and respect. We pride ourselves on that, and even though you may be the best Pukpuk player or have a great weekend game, but you still have to come back on the weekend during the week and earn your sport throughout the week. So this is some of the things that we took out of work ethic, being disciplined. Humility is one of the huge things.
Yeah.
No matter how big you are, you think. You obviously got Coach Robert, someone that's very few with words, and he just knows how to put you down. And like just yesterday game, the boys had a good week against a second place team, and he just knows what words to put in you to put you where you belong.
No,
and it just keeps you grounded too, Emmanuel.
No,
Yeah.
I think, not trying to downplay it, but the club culture we had at Harlequins,
Absolutely.
that was a platform for all of us. Like it just made a massive difference for myself. Coming from wildlife, like just from the block, and just not having those guidance, but coming through that system. Coach Robbie, even Coach Billy, like having those mentors and father figures that just mold and shape us. I think that club culture was massive for me, and I think that's the same for all sports. Like when you've got a good club culture, when you've got good club mentors and coaches, like they really change your lives. Like for me, I always tell this story about, I all throughout high school I didn't sort of have I didn't have an end goal. Like I was just going through the motions of just passing the grades, and my parents were teachers, so like for me, as long as I had to do well in school, but I didn't have an end goal or an ambition to be someone. I think when I joined Harley's, I remember always seeing Coach Robbie. He would rock up in his at that time Coach Robbie was practicing law, and he was a big time lawyer for MVIL at the time, and like I would always see him come in to training all dressed up, iron shirts, iron pants, nice polished black shoes, and a nice car, work car. And, for me, that was my drive. Like I remember seeing him always standing up, and I just told myself, I'm just going to do law. I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I knew that was my sort of my end game when I was coming through the club, and that changed my approach to school. Like I started being disciplined, trying to maintain my grades, just being there in class, be in tune, not just going through the motions, like I was really focused. I knew where I wanted to get to now because I had this good culture and these good people around that, in sports or in rugby that gave me that drive to get somewhere. So yeah, I think for me, and I think for Shane as well, having a good sports culture, like for us was the Harlequins culture, that definitely was our platform.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like, how we spoke about this before we came on the podcast. Someone like Coach Robbie was one person that I remember that was very hard to impress. This guy. And I think he sort of deliberately has his persona so that it keeps the boys grounded. So that even though he had a really good game, good points, everything worked well. He's that sort of benchmark or that father figure that always puts you back where you need to go, put you back in your corner. Hey, like young lad, you have to go back in your week in, week out, you're gonna in your sports again in the first 15, and work hard for it. And I think like if we're gonna go back to our own personal lives, Emmanuel, and how we took that work ethic, the discipline, the humility, the respect of respecting each other, respecting the opposition, and stepping out. And obviously, you and I went on to further studies and working and in that aspect.
I think what's important is juggling that school, that transition with school and sports. Like we spoke about how that we had such a good culture. I think it's not to say that we had difficulties as well. I think that difficulty about juggling sports and education, it's not an easy thing to do, especially for us where sports isn't, well, for rugby, I guess, it's not as professional, we're just doing it for the love of it. But you get so caught up in your clubs, in your sports, that sometimes you can lose sight of the important things. And for me, I think that was the biggest difference, was having that, that culture, the club, those leaders that we had to still keep us on track, that to prioritize education, because I think we're seeing it now where there isn't a lot of opportunities for employment. Things are looking tough, and if you've got a good culture in place, if you've got good mentors, it makes a big difference, because then it allows you to grow, to prioritize. And for me, that I'm grateful for rugby, because I was able to pick up those values that I had and transition them to education. And I'll give you one example. Was you spoke about how Monday was always our blowout sessions at Harley's. I always used to think about that Monday like taking maths. Maths A. I took maths A when I was in high school. I hated maths. I wasn't that good. But I always saw it as a Monday session, in that I needed to smash it, or I needed to turn up and at least put in. So taking those values, that mindset, and transitioning it across to education made a huge difference for me. Time management, these are the other values that you pick out from rugby. It made a massive difference for me in education. So I think sports and rugby and sports in general, they give you these life tips or these life lessons that you don't get in class. You don't get through the normal education things. Like the values of, like you spoke about humility. There's values about discipline, about hard work. These things you can't learn in the classroom. And for me, I was fortunate that rugby and sports provided me those tools that I was able to then apply to education, and I was able to manage education. My tests and exams, it wasn't easy, but coming from that sports culture just made it a lot clearer in terms of what I needed to do.
Absolutely. Like for me personally, I think 2012, I believe. Yeah, I think I finished high school, and I was obviously looking for a placement in university, and I was fortunate to take up a scholarship in Indonesia for about 4 years. So I pursued my computer science degree, and I went to Indonesia for about 4 years. And so I'm not sure if you know about Indonesia, is a very Islamic culture, third world, second world country, densely populated. Bahasa Indonesian based. Besides going to school, and so as a young person going through in an unknown territory where I'm obviously Christian background, and going to an Islamic culture, and still having that rugby core values from Harlequins that are embedded in me at a very young age, I was able to, as Emmanuel touched on, I was able to have an end goal, and rugby, helped us to those week in, week outs, ending your sports, even though you had a good game, come back on a Monday, knowing that there's a large pool of players that will be vying for spots. So having that mindset bring it back to the context of when I was in uni, regardless of the Islamic culture I was exposed to, I had to learn the language. I had to,
How long was that? Like you had a year to learn the language?
in the first year, I had, in the first semester, Bahasa was part of one of the courses they had to take up. I think it was the first and second semester of the first year.
And this is the first time you were learning Bahasa.
First time learning
High school
Bahasa,
now.
first time out of my family's comfort zone. So you could imagine, the world at your feet, freedom, mom and dad not miles away. And you could imagine, there's alcohol, there's clubbing, there's space to, date and, women and all that sort of thing. But still having the discipline of, coming
The
back
values.
to the value system that, like Emmanuel and I went through it at being part of a rugby club at Harlequins. That enabled me to guide me, during my four-year period being away from home and family. I had an end goal was to get that paper, regardless of the challenges with the language barrier or, the food or the people. You just had to find a way to, you finish the assignment or stay up late or
Just find a way.
Ensure you find a way, man. It's,
Yeah.
Ensure you submit the paper on time, because otherwise, you won't get the paper at the end of the day. And I remember this. I think it was the first year. And after 6 months in, and obviously you got mom always calling and checking. Dad, the tough love person, and mom would call and say, "Hey, are you okay? Is everything okay?" And try to check on you. I think so. After a year, I came back and I lost a lot of weight. Given the Asian culture, they've eaten very small portions
food.
of the food, and the spicy as well. So even though I was away, when I got back, I lost a lot of weight. Given the Asian diet, and so my mom asked me to stay back. No, it's okay, stay back. And when my dad said, "No, you have to go back to school. There's nothing good in Port Moresby." Yeah, so we just toughened it out, and for the last 4 years we managed to pull through. But yeah, just going back to the culture, learning at Harlequins, 2007 to 2012, and being under Coach Billy, and that system of just the work ethic, the discipline, that enabled me to succeed. And even like now coming back to our professional careers and pursuing, goals with our jobs and trying to further studies and all that, we still carry that culture on in our daily lives.
Yeah,
How
but
did
absolutely. Like, even when I was going through uni as well, that 04 to 07 era where we also won a couple of grand finals, we lost some. At that time as well, I was trying to, I was cracking into the 7 squad and the 15s. All those things happening at the same time. I was at uni trying to get my law degree. And like Shane mentioned, just having that culture, that coming through that culture and then having those core values, like it made a massive difference for me, I remember when I was in fourth year, my final year for law school, and I was trying to make the 7th squad to go for the South Pacific Games for the national team, the Pukpuks. And that process alone, I had to take at least 3 months off school, and this was my final year. Because we were training the house down, we had squad trials, we were all trying to make that team to then go and play and then come back. So all up, like I missed about 3 months of my final year. I remember talking to my dean at that time, the late Professor Luluaki, and I told him, say, look, I've made the squad. I'll be traveling to Samoa to play, and I was asking for dispensation, and my Professor Luluaki, just looked at me and said, "Son, if you go, you're gonna fail. Don't go. This is your final year." And I remember it was just a massive crossroads for me, but I think the thing I was confident about was just the values that I had embedded in me through the Harley system, that I was applying, that I knew I could still do it. So I remember just taking the risk and going for those 3 months. You know, we ended up getting a bronze medal in that, in the South Pacific Games. And I ended up also passing law school. So, but I think the values that you get from sports or from many other different sports, I guess, not just rugby, you can help transition and apply those in school or education. Like it just makes a massive difference. So it's grateful for those values.
Yeah, no, great story. Just hearing you speaking about it had a light bulb moment within myself, but perhaps we can.
Hopefully, a good light bulb moment.
No, it's just the rugby system. Like we came through, and I had some success as well. I think at my young stages, I think under 16 Pukpuks. I think it was 2000. I think it was 7. I believe. I can't remember. I think we played in the Queensland State Championships. The team was made up of some of lay boys, some of boys from Mosby, some from Rabaul, one from Kevin, I think. And then 2008 as well. And then went on to the under 19 Pukpuks system as well. We went to Samoa, I believe, and then Russia. And then we had another Samoan trip. That's the one that there was a fight that happened.
I think we'll leave that fight out.
I had a scenario where that other summer trip, that under 19th trip, I got called into the school because the same year we went to Russia in 2010, I think in April, and then the Samoan trip was in September. So I got called in by my principal. Given when you get selected, you get the letter saying that you've been selected for the under 19 teams. So I presented asking for school leave because I had already flown out for 3 weeks to Russia, and then asking for another 3 weeks. So they just they said no, a big fat no. Coach Rooney was there, I believe Coach Sydney was there, and I couldn't remember. I was just so shattered, that I wouldn't be traveling, and if I had traveled, I would have missed the grade 12 exams. And so that was quite a different for me because I had to stay back and finish grade 12, and then the boys went on and they played. So, but some of the life decisions that we all come.
So Shane, we spoke about how applying the values that we picked up within the Harleys Club or the rugby, the rugby culture. How have you been able to make that transition and apply those values through your own career now?
Yeah, so after uni, coming back into Port Moresby and going back into the family environment and then trying to apply for a placement. And as you all know, it's quite challenging to get a job here in PNG in general. And so it obviously took a bit of time for myself, even though I had a degree or had an education, given the environment or the market we're in here in PNG, it certainly took over a year for me to get a job placement. But again, going back to the values, the patience and just sticking to, or trusting yourself, and also building a network or a group of friends or family that believes in you, because time to time you get to question yourselves, like, what's going on. You start blaming yourself, but you're having that, I think, education piece helped to finally get something as in a placement or job opportunity that assists me to progress well. I think it's about 7 years now that I've been working.
So what's your current role now?
Yeah, so currently I work at ANZ Bank as a transaction banking manager. So obviously my computer science background, we do some integrations between accounting systems and all that sort of thing. So so that's what I do at. Prior to that, I was at BSP, and so since then it's just keeping year in, year out, trying to stay or better myself in terms of if it's reading more, or, meeting customers or meeting people of different caliber, and trying to impart some of those traits that they have from a professional standpoint into my own own personal characters.
But you still, those values that we picked up through sports, through rugby, do you still continue to apply them in your current role?
Yeah,
and how do you apply them?
Absolutely. Like you may have going back to the training that we used to have. You may have a great week at work. You may deliver something really well, or get a sales pipeline deal delivered, or get a loan approved or whatever. But we can't be complacent and arrogant. You have to stay competitive. Given when you're working in a banking sector, you obviously got competitors around. So, and just like in rugby context, you can't be complacent. You have to work hard to earn your spot. Just like we spoke about earning a spot in the first 15th team. In my professional environment, obviously I had colleagues around me who are also vying for, the top spot, or and so I had to be, and obviously we had KPIs year in, year out, so you have to make sure you meet your targets, or apply yourself better, and that obviously involves discipline and a lot of humility as well, given the corporate world can be a bit challenging with it's like a pyramid sort of operating rhythm where everyone's trying to get to the top, so you have to stay competitive. And another thing I also learned is you have to be self-awareness is another piece that you sort of learn over time. So you know yourself, you know how far you've come, having those reflections, just like how we spoke about rugby, just so that you know where you're heading towards. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and likewise, I think where I'm at with right now in my career, in a group legal counsel, like those values that I picked up through sports, through Harleys, through rugby, I continue to apply those values, just time management, sacrifice, just
Extra
turning
hours.
up, putting in. It's still applicable across, education and career, and I've been fortunate that I still continue to apply those life values, those life skills that we picked up through Harleys and through rugby in general, and sports. I guess that's the important thing. So yeah, the values, it doesn't just stop at the playing field. It doesn't stop at just at training. Actually you can carry it off the field, and you can use it to really make something of yourself and your family. So yeah, I think that's an important part about what our podcast is about, Beyond Bava Park. I think it's all about assisting all these kids that are going through this phase now, of whether it's high school or uni, where you're juggling rugby or sports in general with education, that you can pick up all these great life values and you can continue to apply them, and those life values can actually be your platforms to be something better. It's done wonders for me, for Shane as well, and for a lot of other successful people, whether it's in business or other professions that they're doing right now. I believe those values that they picked up in sports, for us it was through rugby, that you can still continue to apply them. So with Beyond Bava Park, for anyone that doesn't know Beyond Bava Park, Bava Park is the home of rugby in Port Moresby, and I think it's the home of rugby in PNG. For us, it's to be something more than just about sports, to pick up all these sports life skills, these rugby life skills that you can then transition or apply them off the field in your own, whether it's through education, through your own career, so that you can build something better for yourself and your families. And we hope that with the podcast that we'll be able to assist other young kids that are going through this transition phase now, to really focus on those life skill values and more importantly focus on how you can apply them in education, because those two platforms can really help you grow and be something. So hopefully with our podcast, we'll share our stories. Not only that, we'll try to bring on other rugby players that we played with that have gone beyond Bava Park as well and have made something
out of
themselves, that they can also impart their own experiences, their knowledge and the stuff they've picked up that has made or contributed to their own personal growth. So hopefully this podcast can assist kids when you're tuning in. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you joining us for a podcast. Please subscribe to our YouTube link below.
And you can follow our socials. They should be on the link below as well on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye for now.